hammer. Alright guys, little update on the turbo here. So far, in order to get the oil drain on here, I had to actually elongate the holes. They needed to be a little bit wider. These two holes here needed to be a little bit further apart. So I just took a drill bit and sort of pulled it in this direction, and that worked fine. It is now moving on to the water drains, or the water system for it, which you can see sits here like this, but when this one's lined up, that one's off by a lot. Like, it needs to be over here. So we're off by probably a ½ an inch, because that's lined up there and now that one's lined up there. So what I'm going to do is, there's nothing wrong individually with this side or that side. It's the fact that they're joined here and they just need to be spread apart. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this and make this two separate pieces. All right, so we've got our VF39. Modified these two coolant lines to fit. I had to modify the drain just a little bit to fit, but it's in there. And this bad boy should be ready to drop right in. I'm back. It's the next day. Well, it's a couple days later. I got to work and stuff. The VF39 is all installed. I'm about to swap over some Legacy GT 550 or 565s for the injectors, and I've got all the plugs out. It's a little gross looking in there, so I want to spray a little bit and crank the motor while I'm priming the oil for the new turbo. And also, this thing hasn't run in like a year, so like the head probably don't have any oil in them, and everything drained down in. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then crank this thing a little bit onto some paper towels to catch a lot of the crap, and then throw the plugs back in with the new wires and put the intake back on, and we should be ready to see what this thing sounds like. Alright, so we got the wires on, there's some loom on there. I'm going to leave the front covers off just in case I need to pull the belts, fans, and crank pulley off to take a look at the tensioner or anything if it's still making noise. And also if the noise is actually coming from the front. If I hear a noise in the back, I'm not going to look for stuff in the front. So I'll go ahead, stick the reservoir back in here. I can clean this up, and I would throw the battery in, except I need to get it out of my other car. I purchased an Optima today, but that's actually going to go in the Outback because the Outback needs a dry cell for the battery relocation, because you cannot mount a regular battery in the cabin. It will explode. It is time to get the battery in this, and after that, I think I'm going to clean up a little bit. It's looking pretty rough in here. Working on 2 cars at the same time. Lots of tools. There's even some sawdust because I had to do something with some wood. Yesterday I went out and I got an Optima red top for the Outback. The reason being, I'm going to relocate the battery, and you can't have a lead acid battery in the cabin. So that is an insulated dry cell. No danger of explosions. Then I took the battery that was in that I just bought a couple of months ago, and we're going to stick that in here because it sat for a year. I don't trust a battery that sat for a year, even if I charge it up. I don't want to get strained. Get my hammer. Got our homemade downpipe. Oh yeah. Alright, well, it's holding fuel pressure. I'm going to start it up and see if it makes the terrible noise again. And that's the first time she ran in a year. It does sound a little off. It's nowhere near as loud as it was. It sounded literally like a bucket full of bolts. It was so bad. And it was coming from this area. I still have a noise that seems to be coming from like under the intercooler. Oh, and I'm an idiot. My blow-off valve. I was hearing some vacuum hissing and whatnot, and that may actually make a difference. We'll see. Alright, well, we're going to let that run for a while because this thing's got some really old gas in it. Here's the update with this. I let it run for a while and just kept listening around to try and figure out what the noise was. I had a long screwdriver that I was using like a stethoscope, and it wasn't anything on the engine. When I checked it with the stethoscope, screwdriver, the motor wasn't that loud. When I got to the bell housing for the trans, it got a little louder. When I moved it over to the starter, it was really, really loud. Like it was, I've never had it so harsh through the back of a screwdriver handle where it actually felt like I was being like almost electric shocked. It was crazy, the noise that was coming out of that. So I think something was contacting the starter for some reason. So I started thinking maybe flex plate, and I figured, you know what, I'm going to take this thing to get it inspected. I want to try and get some miles on it, and while I'm driving it, I'm going to dial in the injectors with the SAFC. So I'm sitting here at idle, and as soon as I get to the 2,000 RPM low load, to tune that, I'm holding the car at 2,000 RPM, and about 10 seconds later, it just stops. The noise goes away. It's fine now. I don't know what it was, but it just stopped. Could be an input shaft, could be a torque or a flex plate, it could be something with the starter hanging up. I'm not sure, but it's not doing it now. I started it up. I probably drove this about 100 miles last night. So tomorrow I'm taking it in for inspection. I'm going to put a few more miles on it tonight, throw some wiper blades on it. And right now what I'm about to do is, this thing has snow tires on it, because when this broke down last year, it still had the snow tires on it from the winter. I hadn't gotten around to switching the other tires back on yet. And then COVID hit and it broke down, and I was like, well, it can just, you know. But it's funny because a whole snow season went around with the car parked, and now that it's damn near June, I can finally swap on the all seasons. Tires are done, brakes are good, suspension's tight.